Well, at this point, I would say no. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. First of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to come here. It's really important that we host these community listening sessions in order to get feedback and input from our community. And so I would like to take just a few minutes to introduce the people that we have here from our school district. My name is Andrea Rusk, and I'm the principal here at Brainerd High School.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nancy Anderson. I'm the principal at the Lincoln Education Center, which is just across the street.
Good evening. I'm Jessica Hapajoki, and I'm the principal at the Brainerd Learning Center.
We have a number of people here from our school district that I'd like to introduce, and so I'm going to just ask you to give a wave to the group when I call your name. It's kind of like roll call. First, here to the right, tonight you'll be hearing from some people that are from a company called FJJ, and so we have Glenn Chido. Glenn is over there, and Eric Kaiser. And then we also have Erica Markinson. Erica right there is from Winseth Smith and Nolte. And from our district, we have Superintendent Larson, who will be here just in a moment to speak to you, and our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Willie Severson. And we have our Director of Business Services, Steve Lund. And we have our Director of Teaching and Learning, Tim Murtha. We have our Director of our Facilities and Grounds, Earl Willett. We have our Communications Director, Carla Sand, right there on the camera. And we welcome School Board Member Sue Kern. And also, very important tonight is our IT men. We have Justin Barnhart back there and Sean Tollefson, who is our IT person here at the high school. And then I'm also joined by two members of our administrative team here at Brainerd High School, and that's Nate Merceth, who is assistant principal, and Dave Frank, assistant principal. And then school board member Sue Kern. Did I mention Sue? Okay, I just want to make sure. My glasses aren't on, and here I'm holding them, so there I maybe should use them. So thanks again for taking time out of your schedules. It's important, and I'm going to at this time turn it over to Superintendent Larson.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Just with this on? I think we can. Good evening, everyone. It's just so nice to be here tonight. And the past few weeks, a whole group of us have been going around the community and talking about the facility project and the work that's been done the last couple of years regarding the facilities and where we hope to go in the process as we move forward and looking at the comprehensive facilities within our district. Tonight, Steve Lund and I are going to walk you through that whole process. Steve is going to start here in just a minute, and he's going to talk about the last 2 years with some of the research that's been done throughout the school district and a lot of the information that's been accumulated and bringing this data forward so that we have a comprehensive facility plan in place looking at the whole district as a whole. But then we want to take this just a little bit closer and look at what are the priorities in each of the buildings, what are the direction that we want to go with each of the facilities, or what are the highest need items in each of the facilities. And that's where I'm going to take over. And I'm going to talk about when I came in July and how we take this process forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Lund, and he will start this process, and then I will continue from there. So thank you very much for being here. It's just a pleasure to have so many people. Thanks.
All right, Lane, thank you. So as Lane mentioned, we're here clearly to talk about facilities tonight, but let's not forget that at the core of what we do as a school district is about kids. Okay, so while we're going to talk a lot about facilities and the role that they play in that process, we're here tonight to really concentrate on what we can do best for the students of our district. So we're going to share with you tonight information. And we've been at this a long time, and we've gathered a lot of information in the first steps and stages of this. So we're going to share with you a lot of that information that we have gathered. But more importantly, we're tonight going to want to hear from you. So we want to talk specifically about Brainerd High School, Lincoln Education Center, and the Brainerd Learning Center. But also, too, we really want your perspective about the district as a whole. And the folks from FJJ are going to pull you through that process tonight. So let's first talk about where we've been and some of the information we've gathered thus far. So over the past nearly 2 years, we've done a lot of digging into our enrollment, our demographics, how that relates to the capacity, the space that we have in our schools to serve the number of students, not only today, but what we foresee in the future as well, looking out about a decade. And then we really scoured through the condition of our schools. We spent a lot of time going from the basement all the way up to the roofs of the buildings and really taking a close look at those things that we better be paying attention to from a facilities maintenance perspective in the foreseeable future. So let's spend just a little bit of time on enrollment. We'd love to sit here tonight and tell you that that's what our enrollment is going to look like for the next decade, but that's just not really what our demographic data says. So we can get rid of that and really focus on what we did find in our demographic study. We found that over the next 10 years, our starting point was actually the 2014-15 conclusion of that school year, where we ended at about 6,436 equivalent students. Looking out into the next 10 years, they came up with about 3 different scenarios of what we could expect for student enrollment. And as you can see, the growth that we're looking at for the next 10 years isn't unmanageable or insurmountable. If you look at the low part of that, you can see that we would expect to grow K-12 of about 260 students. You know, the midpoint would be something less than 500, and the top would be less than 700. When you break that down, that's over the next decade or the next 10 years, and when you really break that down, it's actually less than 1%, or about 1%, even on the high end, about 1% per year for the next 10 years. So something that clearly we think that is probably manageable. So how do we manage it? So when we look at capacity, how much space we have in our schools in which we can serve the students, not only that we have today, but what we can expect in the next 10 years. When we start out the elementary school, we have current enrollment right now, K-4 in all 6 of our buildings, of about 2,454 students. That average growth, that 0.7% on average for the next 10 years, equates to about a little over 2,600 students in our elementary schools. Now, when you start to fold in what we expect our enrollment to be, not only now but in the future, and fold in the capacity, you can see that the capacity we have is about 2,150. Now, when we talk about capacity, it's not just the overall broad how many square feet per student, but also we got to think in perspective of the core spaces in our buildings and what is the appropriate amount of those core spaces outside of just the classrooms. But think of gymnasiums and think of media centers, think of the space we're in right now, cafeteria, and more importantly too, think of the site with playground and green space. So when you factor in those core spaces within that, as well as the classrooms that are in the buildings, that's how we kind of arrive at that 2,150 capacity. So you can see as of right now in our elementary schools, we need space of about 300 students. And as you go through the future, that could climb as high as 475 or close to 500 additional spaces that we'll need, okay? Now when you look at the next 2 levels of our organization, you can see the middle school, we did a lot of things right when we constructed Forest View Middle School, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in detail as we progress through. But one thing that we did do is we built it big enough, okay? So as we look at how we need to be positioned for not only where we are right now, but the future, you can see that we're sitting just fine with a capacity of about 2,200 and a need of about 2,120. Now from a high school perspective, there's a lot of things that we do need to visit about and talk collectively with our community about what we envision our high school to be in the future. But from a capacity-only standpoint, sheer space, we have enough space at about 2,000 capacity based on what we anticipate for a need in the next 10 years. So when we talk about elementary school space, and you can see the tightness that we have with a 2,150 capacity serving about 2,450 students, you can see that because when you've been in our buildings, if you have been, we've taken spaces and made spaces out of them, okay? So we've tried to carve up as much as we can. This damn fly. Sorry. We have taken spaces that traditionally shouldn't probably be used for instruction, have had to make instruction spaces out of them, okay? And we've moved instruction into just about every place that you can think of in these buildings, even out in the hallway, trying to make space for individualized learning in classrooms. Actually, we've taken those storage spaces and had to really tuck them into areas that every nook and cranny of the building that we have. Our next project, Earl, is to actually start creating instructional space on the stages of our elementary schools. So we're trying to create individualized learning areas all over, and that's kind of the next target area. This happens to be Harrison. We're extremely tight for space in that building. But when you look at the broad measurement, we do a lot of comparisons with school, whether it be finances or whether it be different student measurement, student achievement data. We look at a peer group, and these are going to be districts and communities that look like us. They're districts that are of similar size, they're communities that are similar to us, they're regional centers. Communities such as Wilmer and Alexandria, St. Cloud, Sartell. These are in our conference, so we play these on the football field, play these teams on the football field and on the basketball court and so on. But we also use these as good comparisons just to kind of check in to see how we're doing. So when you look at from a space perspective on for our elementary space, the MDE guideline says you should have around 125 to 155 square feet per student, okay? You can kind of see where we lie there, but you can also take a look and see where other school districts have positioned themselves from a space perspective. Not surprising they land in that 130 to 140 average, because that's about where the average is for the MDE guidelines. And you can see where we sit right now. We're kind of in the two bookends of Bemidji and Moorhead. It's not surprising what they're doing in Bemidji right now, and it's not surprising what they're doing in Moorhead. So districts similar to us are going through processes very similar to ours. They have issues that are similar to ours too. And they're finding solutions that are a good fit for their community, just like we're trying to find solutions too that are a good fit for our community. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about condition. Like I said, we spent a lot of time really assessing the overall condition of our facilities, okay? And there again, scouring them from the basement up to the roof, and really trying to get a grasp on what we have to attend to in the foreseeable future. But overall, we're a big district. We are the 5th largest by student population, the 5th largest district outside of the 7-county metro area, okay, serving about 7,000 kids, pre-K through 12. But we're a big district geographically. We cover 516 square miles. We educate those students in 12 facilities, about 1.2 million square feet on about a half section of real estate. So we have a lot in which we are responsible to care for. But when you really look at those 12 facilities and start to stack up what they look like from an overall condition relative to age, you can kind of start to formulate a picture, okay? So if you go all the way through our facilities, from the oldest all the way down to the newest, you can see that the oldest facility was constructed in 1929. It's nearing a century mark for us. And we travel all the way down to our newest facility, which was constructed in 2004. What's interesting to look at with this and start to formulate that picture that I talked about was you can see that over this time period, which is nearing 100 years, every 10 to 15 years, there's been somewhat of a replacement cycle, okay, where there's been new buildings that have been added into the fleet of 1,200 that serve the students in our community, you know, with the exception of right there. In the building we have, that we're standing in right now, was constructed in 1968. We took a 35-year pause before we constructed Forest View in 2004. So if you think about it, just in broad terms, if you think about trying to find a replacement cycle and develop something for 12 facilities, if you were to do a replacement of that, each facility every 10 years, by the time you got back to that first one, it'd be 120 years old. Okay, but if you're on a 35-year replacement cycle, by the time you got back to that first one, it'd be 420 years old. So we got to find a balance of what that looks like in order to keep those facilities fresh and relatively new over the course of time, this being nearly a century time frame that we're looking at. So when you look at, there again, the comparisons to say, well, how do we compare with districts and other communities that kind of look like us? There again, same, Sartell, Sauk Rapids, Bemidji, Alexandria, Wilmer. You can see how we stack up in the average age of our facilities. You saw that century mark, that nearly century mark, that works out to be an average age of about 44 years. And then we also took a look at not only districts that we compare ourselves to, but also districts that we compete against. And these are districts that we compete against locally. And you can see how we stack up against those. Not far behind us, kind of nipping at our heels as far as average age in our peer group is Wilmer. And we can see right now what they're doing in Wilmer. So there again, districts are looking at the very same things that we look at and going through processes very similar to what we're doing to find what fits in their community. So let's talk a little bit about that future maintenance. We talked a little bit about the average age, and of course the age of the facility. The older the facility, the higher cost it likely is going to be to maintain it. So when you look at future maintenance, how we've measured it is to try to identify all the things in the facilities that are reaching the end of their useful life, okay? It could also be things that, deficiencies that we have in our facilities that we haven't really had the funding to probably bring up to current standard. So things such as secured entrances, accessibility. We have a couple of facilities yet to be accessible for ADA purposes. But it's going to include things, you know, such as tuck pointing, you know, keeping the mortar between the bricks in good shape, the roofs, you know, boilers. We care for a sea of parking lots, and that gets to be quite an expense to take care of the amount of parking lots that we have. And of course, things just as obvious as windows, okay? There again, let's take a look at those 12 facilities. And not surprising, this is in millions of dollars, so not surprising as you travel through the ages of these, you can see that the oldest building has the highest amount at $20 million of future maintenance that kind of looms out there in our horizon. And you can travel all the way down to the most recently constructed building of Forest View, and there again, not surprising, only about $1 million kind of hangs out there of things that we need to attend to from a future maintenance perspective. The next important step then to take with this information, if you total all of those up, there's about $90 million that hangs out there of things that we need to attend to in the foreseeable future. But if you fold in the size of these buildings and start to look at it a little bit more strategically, $20 million, for example, at Washington is a big number, but it's a big building. There's about 140,000 square feet there. So when you look at $20 million and divide it by the sheer size of that building, you come up with future maintenance that hangs out for Washington there of about less than $150 per square foot. But if you take a look at, for example, Lincoln and Harrison, they have about $8 to $9 million of future maintenance, but they're small buildings. They average around 35,000 square feet, between 30 and 35,000 square feet. So when you divide that larger number by that smaller building, you can come up with a square foot cost of future maintenance that hangs out there in those buildings. Now what's important about this is you start to compare that to replacement cost, to say, okay, what does it cost to replace a school in current times? And that's going to be somewhere around that $250 a square foot for construction. And then you really start to think strategically about what should be the course of action for some of these. This isn't the only thing that you want to look at when making those decisions, but certainly one of those things that you do want to kind of pay attention to. So let's talk a little bit about Brainerd High School since we're here tonight, and we're going to focus a little bit about that. The high school itself here sits on 52 acres. It's a campus that's a treasure for us as a community, okay? As you see, a lot of communities that have decided to construct new high schools and put them out on the fringes of their community, we don't see that. We see a campus that sits in the center of our community and serves as that piece that is the center of our community. So if we look at something for the future for the high school, I don't see a new location really for it. I think we should treasure what we have here with that. And we do have property in which we can do some different things to the high school if we want to position it for the next 50 years. We'll be celebrating the first 50 years of this building next year. So what does it look like for the next 50 years? So when you start to look at this building strategically, and we've got a lot of work yet to do with this, but if you really start to take a strategic look at it, you start to think, how can we envision a future for this building that takes into account the 4 A's? You know, whether it be the arts, activities and athletics, and certainly not last or least, the academics. Okay, so what can we do to position ourselves with this campus for the next 50 years with Brainerd High School? We've taken in this first part of this process, we took a lot of look at operational costs, and not just with Brainerd High School, all of them, just to try to get a grasp of what we spend to maintain a building inventory that is nearing 50 years of age. But if you look at the high school, it's interesting. I did a little bit of gathering of data. I went to the MDE website, and it's available for anybody, and you can take a list. I think there's about 5,500 schools in the state, and you can sort that list by the age of those facilities. And I grabbed the 5 newest high schools in the state, and they have an average age of 2010, you know, not overly. I mean, there's a gap in there with the recession where there was a really slowdown in the construction. This is why they have an average age of 2010. They serve about 1,600 students on square feet of not quite 400,000. Our campus is average age of 1967 between the South Campus and North Campus. We educate about 1,700 kids here with a little over 400,000 square feet. So campus-wise, pretty similar. Where it isn't similar is you look at the operation and maintenance cost, okay? So the difference is those buildings had an average maintenance cost of about $2.86 per square foot, where ours was $4.50. Now that may not seem a lot, but when you take that $1.67 by 400,000 square feet, it can add up pretty quick. So as we neared the conclusion of that gathering of information, we really started to formulate options and opportunities, okay? We imagined what some solutions could be, and in that process, we also discovered some opportunities that could lie out there. And we really started to formulate ideas that could really land within 5 R's. You know, whether it be right sizing, we certainly need to do some right sizing with our elementary schools, no question about it. There's a lot of buildings that we need to do some renewal with. We need to certainly probably make some reinvestment, okay? Maybe perhaps some additions to buildings to address some of the capacity, and in that, reinvest in some of those facilities. Perhaps it could include repurposing some facilities, as we see facilities that may have really good useful life left in them, but could perhaps be better utilized in a different way. And replacement is not a question either. We looked at some of the data that could drive you to that decision as well. So as we folded in all that information, we came to kind of this conclusion of that first step in the process, and then we hired a new superintendent. And the school board asked, where do we go from here? So Lane, where do we go from here?
Thanks, Steve. He did a nice job. I always get so impressed when he talks about the work that's been done over the course of the last 2.5 years. And I know that many of you in this room have been part of that process as well. And so we thank you for getting us to this point. Because now, like I said earlier, we've got that umbrella. We have an idea of what the needs are in all of our buildings by looking at all 12 buildings in the district and what the comprehensive needs are for our school district. So when I came in July, that was one of the things that the board said. Lane, this project is too big of a task for us to think that we can possibly undertake everything that's in this plan that we had. And what we need to do is we need to figure out where we go from here. How do we prioritize and how do we make the decisions that are right for our school district and right for our community? So one of the things that we did in October, the Board of Education approved the plan that all of you worked so nicely to complete over the course of the last 2 years so that we knew what that comprehensive look was like. In November, I brought forth to the Board of Education a 6-point plan for looking at what we need to provide the highest quality education possible for all of our learners. And the piece of this that we're looking at today is talking about facilities. The facilities that provide the innovation, the opportunity, and the success that all of our learners need and deserve if they're going to be successful in their future. So during that time when we talked about the 6-point purpose, we wanted to make sure that the objectives of the district, the main priority of the district, were the things that we were going to address as we brought forth recommendations to our decision makers for the future. The first one, as you can tell from the board behind me, is that we want to ensure the safety and security of all of our learners. all of our teachers, and all of our guests when they come and enter our district. The second piece is that, and I think Steve did an eloquent job of talking about this, what are the mechanical and the educational efficiencies that we need to address to make sure that our facilities are functioning the way they need to? What amounts of roofing do we need? Where do we need additional windows? What are the boilers looking like in these buildings? Would HVAC systems be a great priority in some of the facilities for helping us with our energy efficiencies and more? The third objective on our sheet is to provide space that fosters best practice instruction and 21st century learning. I think everybody kind of laughed at me when I came here because I said, you know, we're already 17 years into the 21st century. And so we're just about a quarter of the way through the century, so we really are trying to look ahead. And yet somebody brought it to my attention one day and they said, but Lane, think of what has happened the last 17 years in education and how it has changed as far as standards, as far as best practice instruction methods, as far as technology and all the needs that I have. If we're even looking at this at 17 years more, what are the needs that we have as far as providing the highest quality education for our learners? The fourth objective on our sheet is one that promotes robust space and opportunities in all four of the A's. The Ed Foundation always talks about the 4 A's, and they're so right. We want to provide the most robust programs possible in the area of academics, in the arts within our district, in the athletics, and also in the activities that we provide for our learners. The one thing that we want to be able to say is that every one of the children that are in our school district or that leave our school district, that they have been able to find themselves in our school and to find what it is that they're excited about and their interests are for the future. The next objective is talking about increased community collaboration, ownership, and workforce development. We know that we can never take on an undertaking such as this, looking at 12 facilities within one school district, and think that we're going to ever be able to do it alone. This really needs to be a partnership. It needs to be a partnership in our community within the K-12 education that we have, or the pre-K-12, I should say. It needs to be collaborating with our wonderful college that we have at CLC, and how can we share some of those resources. We need our business partnerships, joining forces so that we are providing what we need for our students. The last word on here is also about workforce development. We know in the Midwest, in Brainerd, Minnesota, that we provide the best possible learners ever. And these are the same kids that we want to carry on this awesome community as we move forward. And so what kind of skills are we giving our children for workforce development if they decide to get a job within our community right out of high school? Or what kind of skills and strategies are we giving our learners so that they can go to CLC and be successful and find career options there? Or if they choose to go to a 4-year school or a post-secondary education beyond that, we want to make sure that we're giving them the skills that they need so they want to come back here someday and carry on our future for us. So when we talk to our business partnerships, they're saying, how are you helping us to develop the workforce of our future? And we know that that is a priority with career and technical education and with all of the offerings that we have right here at Brainerd High School. The next goal or objective that is in our goal is looking at the visionary technology integration. You know, I talked a little bit ago about the last 17 years, how things have changed in education and how might that look in the next 17 years. But we know that technology is one of those huge, huge pieces that has impacted the change in education. Partly because when I graduated from high school, for instance, we hardly even had computers at that time. And now, because of the internet, we know that we have an extremely global society that we need to prepare our kids for. Because not only are our kids competitive with kids within our community, our region, and our state, but they're competitive with kids globally within our world. The next objective talks about transparency, engagement, and community trust building. We want to hear from you. We know that you're the people that are going to have the best ideas that can help us in this process to putting together the right plan that we can move forward with together to enhance and to continue this high-quality education that we have right here at Brainerd Public Schools. And finally, and certainly not least important, in fact, right at the top of the scale, is we need to provide the highest quality educational opportunities, understanding that no investment in something such as what we're looking at today goes without a lot of give and take and generous investment in our schools. And we need to take into consideration the decisions we make and that it is the best decision for our taxpayers' generous investment, because it is an investment. It's an investment in our children, it's an investment in our school, and it's an investment in our entire community as we move forward. So how do we do this? As I talked about a little bit ago, in November I brought forth something, just a 6-phase plan that I thought would help guide us through this process. And the 6 phases are listed here, and I'll take each of them individually in just a minute, so I'll just kind of talk you through them first. First of all, we know that nothing like this is going to happen without a really comprehensive and awesome communications plan. And we know that great communication starts on day 1 and it lasts forever. And so a comprehensive district plan is something that we're very excited about. We're also thrilled, as I see Carla over here, that the district invested in a communications director just to help us in this process to make sure that we are providing communication throughout the district. Phase 2 is stakeholder engagement. We want to hear from the people within the district, the employees of our district, and we want to hear from you, our community. Because we know that by doing these kinds of listening sessions, we're going to figure out what it is that are the priorities that we can continue, or that we can collaborate and move forward with. Phase 3, this is the phase that really is up to the Board of Education. And what it does is it provides opportunities for the board that they can look at additional assessments or additional surveys that they may want to do to gain more stakeholder input before they make a decision. Phase 4 is to develop the project's scope, options, and alternatives. Phase 5 would be going to a bond referendum election process. And then if we're able to be successful in a bond referendum process, then we would move forward in the comprehensive construction management services. So let me take these one by one for you just for a minute to kind of let you know where we're at in each of the phases and what our plan is as we move forward. Phase 1, the communications planning. As I talked about, there really are 2 objectives in this. First of all, always putting forth our students' academic achievement at the forefront of our decision making and communicating a vision for what that means for the students of our future. We also want to make sure that we are providing with our residents with all of the information that they need to make the best decision that they can regarding a potential bond referendum project. At the bottom, you're going to see something called Blueprint 181, Investing, Growing, and Leading. And that was the new URL that we came up with. It's a new website for the school district because we know that we need to communicate today in a whole bunch of different manners. We want to continue our strong area, like working with our local newspapers, our radio stations, sending home newsletters from our school district, some of the more traditional ways that we communicate in the past and that we want to continue to communicate in the future. But we also know that we need to do more things for those that are intact with social media and that frequently use the internet, and we need to be able to communicate in another sense as well. And we know that a lot of our tools are online, just as our Blueprint 181 is. What this website is, if you go to blueprint181.org, you are going to be able to find every single document that we develop regarding this building project. You are going to find all of the information that we have at each of these listening sessions. Any kind of information that the public is looking for is found at that website. So I invite you to please go to it. It's kind of fun to scroll through there and see some of the work we've done so far, and as we keep moving forward, what that work looks like. Any question